Welcome everybody to this incredible panel of experts. Today we're going to talk about to intent or not to intent. Isn't that the question, right? So before we jump into that, and I want to thank RingLead for bringing us all together to talk about this incredible topic, I want to first of all meet the more interesting people than myself, these wonderful panelists. Why don't we start with you, Tessa? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your intent, horror, or crazy or myth story?
Wow, that is, you're really leading the witness there, Alon. So I'm Tessa Barron, VP of Marketing at On24. I currently run our demand gen and all of our go-to-market strategy. And what my favorite part about doing that is I get to work with our customers in building their webinar, virtual event, and content experience strategies and talk about how they can leverage the data to actually surface the intent of their audience. And I think that that is something that I feel like is perhaps not a horror story, but a common mistake that a lot of marketers make, where we get, we think of intent as one thing only, and that it's coming from a third party algorithm somewhere out there on the internet. And we forget that we actually have a lot of intent at our fingertips called first party intent, and we forget to use it. And, I think that that's a critical takeaway that I hope everyone has today, is that the shiny object of intent can be as simple as, did someone visit your website? And you don't necessarily need a fancy algorithm to figure that out. And that's really, the foundation for success. So that's definitely my perspective. And I guess if I were to go on a horror story side, it's salespeople constantly bugging me about the latest intent model. That's a conversation I've had one too many times. I love salespeople, but
some of my best friends are. All right, thanks, Tessa. Eyal, why don't we go over to you?
Thanks. So my name is Eyal Orgil. I'm the CRO and one of the co-founders at DealHub. DealHub's been running now for about 7 years, so I've been in this business of working with people and gaining some intent out of them for quite a few years now. I think what I'd say from a horror story point of view, where we do things in intent, is we're able to tell people when they're actually looking at certain things or taking certain actions. And the horror story, I guess, is when you don't use that intent correctly and you become sort of creepy. You sort of reach out to someone and say, hey, I know you just downloaded this piece of content, like I want to talk to you about that, or I know you just did such and such action. And it's like, who are you? Why are you calling me? And how do you know that I just did that? So things in intent, you got to take it, you got to do it smartly. There's a lot of things that we know about people. I'm always amazed at how, Google knows, well, we know Google knows about us, but all of a sudden these other people are starting to reach out to you and they're saying, I just know you did this and all that. So I think it's really something you got to reach out to, and you got to do it smartly. And, that's sort of the creep out sort of thing that I've, seen when it's done wrong sort of things. So you got to have a lot of, responsibility around that, of how you're doing that to make yourself not look bad, but also to make sure that you're getting the value out of what you're trying to do. So without scaring off the people. So I guess that's sort of my horror story on intent.
Love it, Eyal. I think we'll get back to some of those elements very much, have a little fun around it as well. Jess, why don't we have off to you? If you want to give us a horror story, is fine, or if you want to then transition into what types of intent should we be looking at?
Yeah, I could probably take maybe a little bit of both, if that's okay. So I am the CRO at Crossbeam. Crossbeam, relatively new company. We've been around about 2.5 years. Where we really focus in is, most of us people know us about account mapping and driving some of those connections that exist between partner companies. But the reality of what we actually allow people to do is utilize second-party data. And second-party data is really first-party data that exists at your partners, and bring that into your environment in a permission-based world. And I'll talk more about that, but just to give a little bit more history, before that, I spent about 12 years at Experian Marketing Services, which I think is really the, intent is so hot right now, but it's actually been around a really long time, driven by a lot of different market key metrics that people would actually try and predict and make predictive, ideas on. And some of these third-party sources, these syndicated sources, have been around kind of creating these predictive models to generate that kind of movement. It's much better now. Things like G2 and ZoomInfo that can create that kind of intent are a much stronger opportunity to act on. But it's been around for a while. And if I think about a horror story that we've had, we're a very data-driven organization. We take in data from third-party sources, second-party sources, first-party sources, which I'll talk a little bit about. And you create rules that trigger communications on the things that happen. And if you're not careful about your cadence and your communication, you're going to overwhelm your end consumers, because all of these triggers are kind of happening and falling over each other. So really having a thoughtful approach to your communication structure, I think, is a really important part. We've had people come back to us and say, hey, I just have received a couple too many emails during this time. So that's my horror story. Talking about your second part of the question, which was the types of intent, I kind of touched on this a little bit. To what Tessa was talking about, first party data is a key source of intent. It's the kind of information that you're getting from what they're doing on your site, maybe what they're doing in your application. How do you use that information in a way? In a lot of cases, that comes back in a scoring model or PQL scores. That's what we do a lot with it. Customer success scores. Really useful information that can be drawn from all over the different touch points that you're gathering directly. And obviously very predictive. The other key source that people hear about is third-party data sources, getting the information from the syndicates that are collecting information. So possibly it's around the shopping sites or the information that they're collecting, that they're seeing these behaviors that are really valuable, that trigger that information that you want to act upon, very, very quickly. And so that's another source. And then the key piece that we talk about a lot is second-party source. What's more valuable than getting access to your partner's data, which is first-party data that they've collected in a permission-based way, so that you can see maybe that they're browsing the integration page of their partner and they know that they've clicked on your integration page, and that's a key piece that you should be following up with them to say, hey, you may be interested in this. I can give you more information on this. Or maybe it's a partner, such as a SI partner, and they've downloaded a white paper. How do you actually get access to that so that you can support your partner in selling that deal, because you know the kind of industry they're working or other things that you can get them the right information to really help them. And that, again, is intent data. So it really is across the entire spectrum, and we look at it all kind of 3 levels.
Well, there's a lot of stuff around intent. It's interesting. Well, why don't we like take a step backwards and like try to understand, why is this thing called intent such a hyped thing or misconception, or validated also as well? Why is it trending? That I know that ages me, I know it is what it is. Why is intent so top of mind today for so many CMOs and CEOs even? What it made it the next like ABM thing, the next thing that everybody's focused on? What are your thoughts about it? Why is it such a big thing today?
Maybe I'll say something over here. We actually look at intent a little bit differently than some of the maybe some of the other panelists that I have over here. We focus on getting intent while we're in a sales process, so that when we're reaching out to a customer, when we're sending them content, trying to understand what they're looking at. So we can both generate the content and then take a look at what they're interested in. Why that's super important is you understand the body language of the customer when you don't see them now. People sort of think lately, remote selling, because of COVID, we're all sitting in our bedrooms and selling and all that. We can't really see the other side. And first, people don't turn on their cameras even, so you don't even know what they're doing in a call. But we're not seeing people as much anymore. Even before that, you want the ability to understand when you're not talking to the customer on the phone, if they're a video call, what are they doing? What are they looking at? What are they interested in? I've sent them some content. Was it of interest, or did they just ignore it? Did they not open my email? Did they not look at the content? Where did they spend their time? We have the ability to share content and see where they're spending their time. What's the things that are interesting to them? Who are the different people that are looking at the content? When I'm in a sales process, what's really important to me is understanding all the different buyers in that process. There's multiple different stakeholders. They all have different things that are interesting to them. And I want to understand what they're interested in. So if I don't have that intent, or that any activity monitoring to understand what they were looking at and where they were spending their time, that I don't know where they're at. They could be telling me anything. It's back to the salesperson saying, I have a gut feeling this is going to close. Well, I want to base it off of what we call customer touches. What are they looking at? What are they interested in? Where did they spend their time? So when I share content in the format that we can do it, I can understand what they're interested in. That's why it's super important. And again, it seems to become more important, obviously, once COVID hit, because we were less in front of people, but it's been true all the time. And obviously, we've gone back to being a little more open. It's still important. I want to understand what people are interested in when I'm talking to them, or talking to them in a digital format, not personally right now in a video. I want to understand where they're at, what signals can they give me, so I can understand when to call them back, when to reach out to them, when to provide them more information. So I think it's really become super important to understand your buyers when you're not in front of your buyers.
Tessa?
So I agree, but obviously that's really complex. And I think that intent data has become a substitute for my database is a mess and I don't want to figure it out. So I'm going to go get a third party source instead of trying to fix the mess. I think I honestly do think that's a big reason. And that goes all the way down to the fact that, Salesforce is not a CDP. Most of us are working off of a legacy CRM that was built for sales and not for an actual customer journey. So I think that's the first reason is our data and databases from a legacy standpoint are, they are a horror show. And then also the rise of SaaS. So, when we think about intent, a lot of that was built from an account acquisition standpoint. It was essentially saying, you don't know who your top accounts are, so you need to understand that, because theoretically, you actually can drive a customer searching on the internet from searching to close by swiping a credit card, because there are a lot of companies now that have a freemium model or are operating marketplaces. So, I think that that's the second reason. And then the third is just that buying is happening online. So you want to know who's in the market or not. And I think the convergence of all three of those things have created this groundswell of frenzy and hype around intent.
Yeah. And I just, just to add on to this, I look at intent data, and I think the common misconceptions has always been that this is a top of funnel, are they buying type of driver. And I think as people are seeing intent data and using it more and incorporating it into their models, as they kind of see the whole customer journey, they're seeing that there's value in this data that goes far beyond just, hey, they're in the market, they're ready to buy, but rather I'm finding out that they are, investigating partner companies and they want to build integrations and are going to create a better stickiness or reduce churn. Or I'm finding out that they are, utilizing things on my site and interested in certain areas that I can expand my services into and start to really build onto it. And so I think as people broaden their definition of what that intent data is, it becomes really more valuable across every single segment of the customer journey. And the more you can incorporate it, the more powerful it's going to be. And so I think that's also something people are starting to grasp and understand, and it's really creating a lot more value with intent data as well.
I love it. Let's dive in that a little bit, Jess. So let's talk about the customer lifecycle, right? There's different aspects in the lifecycle of a customer, especially if you're targeting a multiple buyer decision group, whatever term you want to use. And intent signals, intent data, first party, of course, but also third party, should drive the account or the buying targeting committee towards more action that you want to do, whether it's marketing activity, BDR, sales, upsell client, and so forth. So why don't you guys dive in a little bit and tell the audience about what are the use cases or what examples do you have of leveraging intent? What kind of intent along the different stages of customer lifecycle? Jump in, whoever wants to start.
I'm on mute here. Maybe I'll jump in. Again, where we focus on our intent, obviously, I'm talking from the sales side where I'm involved in. We do have our BDRs, and they're doing a lot of intent work when it comes to lead generation, but I'll talk specifically about the sales process. I'm sending out content to customers, and I'm understanding, like I said earlier, when they're looking at content, when they're interested in it, but I can also see when other stakeholders are jumping in. And I can correlate that together with talking to my buyer contact, and he's saying, well, I'm sending it off to the CFO, he's going to sign it. Now, if I know that no one's gone into that content, I know he hasn't gone in. So I'm either chasing back to that contact saying, hey, what's going on? I may let him know that I know it or not, but I'm going to say what's going on, or I do get that indication when the CFO has looked at it or someone else has looked at the content. So I know it's being spread through different stakeholders within the organization. I start to get some understanding. I can look at my pipeline then and say, yeah, that deal is moving forward because people are engaged with the content as opposed to someone who's not taking any action whatsoever. So if they haven't looked at my proposal, I know they haven't looked at my proposal, I can't be hearing a story saying, oh yeah, we're looking at it, we're about to make a decision. So it gives me a lot of information in terms of how my pipeline is moving forward. Obviously for myself, for my sales team, we can see all the information of what's happening with customers being actually engaged with what we're doing. So it's something that we use on a day-to-day basis. Every morning I come in, I can look at who's engaged with my content. I can see during the day when things are happening, people are telling me this is going to happen. It's not happening. And sometimes the intent is not only, we see it on the sales side, not only what's happening and what intent I'm getting, it's what am I not getting? What am I not seeing that's happening? Customers are telling me one thing, but then something else is not happening that should be happening. So I get it both on the negative side and the positive side. Really gives us the ability to work through our day and understand where we have to focus, where we have to spend more time, where things are moving forward and where they're not. And obviously that translates into our pipeline, understanding what's moving forward to close or not. So again, maybe a slightly different process from doing it on a BDR side, but on the sales side, very much, we're very focused on getting that intent and understanding what's happening with our buyers.
Very cool. Tessa, maybe you can jump in and tell us a little bit about the other stages of the funnel, or how do you use them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, oh, did you say Jess or Tessa? Sorry.
Let's go for Tessa first and then Jess.
Are you sure? Okay.
I think I'm okay with it.
I'll be fast. I was just going to say, whoever cracks the nut on intent after a customer signs a deal, I think we'll have the next probably great hype cycle around intent. And that's what's so tricky is it's really difficult to understand, is a customer trying to educate and that's why they're showing intent to buy, or are they really actually interested in an upsell or cross-sell product? And I think that that's where you have to be really, really careful. For us, we actually see customers who are most qualified in showing intent for an expansion product, meaning they buy another product from us in our portfolio, are those who are engaging with us on third-party sources. So our customers who are coming in from an advertisement, it sounds counterintuitive, or content syndication even, those are actually the ones that have a much higher conversion to an additional deal and to a sales meeting than those that are coming to our best practices webinar, because they're out there clearly searching for a solution. We ended up coming up in their search, and so they were able to come back to us. So I think that there's that's the tricky part with customers, is that you almost have to rethink and completely build. I mean, no, you have to completely build your entire model for intent based upon where they are at in their journey.
And I think, if you put your shoes on as a shopper and you talk about, you're going to be buying another product from a given vendor and you go into the store, I think you get the feeling that you're going to get a very biased opinion from that salesperson or that provider that says, hey, you should buy this product because this is what we have and it's better than everybody else's. But if you go to third-party sources, some of them are supposed to be unbiased. You feel more comfortable. You feel like you're getting some kind of rating systems and you're seeing how things are working. And at the end of the day, that makes you feel better as a shopper. But that information then is going to flow back into your original company that's going to get that information and then kind of pull you in and be able to sell you in a very different way. And so I think that data, that third-party data, is still driving those upsell and cross-sells, even though it's a research kind of stage that they're going through, and then you're taking that information, you're acting upon it. So to answer your question, we use that data at the top of funnel. We use it, which everybody does. We use it in what we call our PQL scores, our product qualified lead score. As they're using the product and utilizing it, we also bring in other data elements to identify, like, are they ready to buy? Because we have a freemium product and we're trying to drive them up cycle to a paid version. So we're seeing those type of things happen. And we also use it in our customer success scores. Like, are they ready for, renewals? Are they engaging with our integration partners? Are they shopping for those? And all of those things kind of help drive different scores that give us better ideas on how to interact with each of our customers. So so hopefully that's about it.
I think what's interesting though, is that in all of this, we clearly all have different metrics for what is qualified and what intent is based upon our own go-to-market and business model. And so, you know, out of the box, nothing will work for whatever you try to apply it to unless you make it your own. And, you know, that getting that right is an ongoing process, iterative one that you have to test and experiment against.
So I like that a lot. I think it transitions us a little bit to the, okay, so what do we actually do with this thing? What is the operational focus? Who owns this intent data? Where does it come in? The number one question that always comes up to RevOps: should my BDRs go to the intent tool, or do I put in a Salesforce or into their outreach or Salesloft or any tool of choice? That's always a tough one. Where do I use it? Is it part of the AVM score? Is it not part of the score? Is it the secondary score? So let's start diving into that RevOps world of the data itself. How do we operationalize it? Who wants to jump in first and talk about, first of all, who owns it, and then when do you put it in front of which team, and where should they go to use it?
Well, I'll jump in. I think it's a tough question. And I think to Tessa's point about us all having different businesses, this is probably everybody will have a different answer on this as well, depending on how your organization is formed. From our perspective, RevOps owns it along with growth, and our growth owns a lot of our PQL scores and our customer scores, but also our top of funnel type of information. So there's not a single owner, which makes it a little difficult when you're trying to decide how to buy new elements or new information. But I think both of them kind of sit in that world. And then, you know, I'd say as far as kind of the strategies around it is more of a group decision. So, you know, being the CRO, a lot of that comes up to my team to kind of decide how do we build the different scores, the different strategies, the different processes that come out of it, even though the owner might live within the RevOps space. So that's kind of how we handle it. But we're a relatively young company, so I'm hoping to maybe learn from the other panel members how they use it.
So for us, I mean, it is a shared ownership, and it really comes down. We actually have defined the plays by our sales segment. Again, going back to what I was saying, the plays for expansion and what ultimately signifies whether an account has intent to buy is much different than our segment for acquisition. So within each of those, we define the specific plays and what it and what it's almost like a matrix, right? And what is the key determining factor of whether we run an inbound or whether we run an outbound play, who drives it, how that's orchestrated. And so I think we get really specific. And I think that's super important because one intent model does not, one size does not fit all. And I think that that's sometimes a mistake that people make when they try to operationalize it is they think that, you can take the same ratings and the same plays and apply it to your entire customer base. And that is just not true. In fact, the way that we land with enterprise is we typically land with a single person. We get brought in by someone working in a silo, which means that the typical account intent model isn't going to work. We actually have a different set of criteria entirely. We want to land with almost as little of a footprint as possible. Whereas in our commercial business, we land with the buying committee and we want to land with as big of a footprint as possible. So we really use intent to surface qualified accounts, and we run an MQA plays, marketing qualified account play, versus on the enterprise side, which would seem counterintuitive, we're actually running more MQL plays, meaning we're following up the contact, not with the account. And that's on purpose. So that's been something that we've worked really hard at. It's been jointly shared by sales, SDRs, and marketing. And we've designed it and made it super specific for that reason, because otherwise there's confusion. And ultimately what we realize, no one ends up using the intent model at all unless there's prescriptive plays in place to action it. And that has been key. And documented, by the way.
Excellent. I think the one point here to ask Eyal and Jess to comment on, thank you, Tessa, is when you look at the difference between account and a specific person, the one challenge that we see and we hear all the time, especially when the person who owns prospecting into this account or working this account after extensive activity is, well, who actually has shown this category or this competitor or this space intent? I don't know. I have 75 directors of X that I can go reach into. Should I just call them all up? Like, hey, are you the one that searched my competitor? I don't know if that's best practice. So how do you go around the account level intent versus the person that you actually want to work?
I think if you look at it from our perspective, we're basically targeting, we know who our personas that we want to target. So obviously, if there's intent there, the first person we want to reach out to is the people that we're trying to talk to. That's the buyers that we're looking for. So we're obviously going to start there first. If we don't have a specific person, we're going to start there first. We know in our case, they're looking, the intent we're getting is if they're looking for our type of product, our type of the solution that we can offer, the benefit that we can offer. So we start with the people that are the ones that we first think they're the ones that are probably hopefully looking for it. And then we'll go a little wider from there, but there's no sense shooting in all directions. You still have your personas that you know who you're going to target in the end. Even if you found the wrong person, you found the wrong person, but that's fine too. Let's get them to get us to the right person. So you have to get back to focusing who you're trying to get to in the end. And yeah, sometimes you're shooting in the dark because you don't know exactly who it is, but you've got to be very focused. Our SDR team know the questions to ask, know how to get to the right person. And that's their play that they have to make sure we're getting whatever intent we can as specific or general, and then funneling it down into getting to the right people. So that's basically how we'll try to attack it.
I think the key there, and that's exactly what we do as well. And the key there is in the messaging. If we go out with messages that say, "Hey, I know you're reviewing this article," it's A, even if it was them, it's going to scare them, and B, if it wasn't them, they're going to
story.
right, and then B, it's going to be maybe not targeted. So I think knowing that they viewed this or somebody at their organization viewed this tips you off that there's a problem there, and then the message is going out and talking about the problem and saying how we solved the problem, not that I know you did this and I'm going to help you. And so I think if we follow that, then we can use our persona approach and with the right content and target them appropriately with the right data without getting kind of creepy and, overly ambitious, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, Jess, I like what you're talking about that, because when you're saying that, yeah, when you reach somebody, more than likely someone else knows about that problem as well. So it's not just that it's one person that's looking. If there really is intent in the organization to go out and look for a solution, more than one person knows it. Hopefully you fell in the right bucket, you're in the right area. But you can definitely use that person. We see that all the time. We're going to one person, they're bouncing us to the next person, but we're trying to ask the right questions, target it to the right people to find out exactly who was the one looking at that content. Or even if we don't find the same person that was looking for the content or whatever they were, showing the intent from, we got to the right group of people that have that pain. So sometimes obviously SDRs have to do their work. They have to dig in a little bit.
Yeah, and just to follow on to that, if you look at how at least an organization works when they do have a pain, they usually assign analysts or junior people to go out and do that research and come back and present it to the senior leaders. But if you go back with information that says, hey, I know you have this problem to the senior leaders that are your contacts, they're probably the ones that started that initiative in the first place. And so you're not having to go through those gatekeepers again and bottom up. You're kind of going top down with solving their problems. So it can actually be a very effective strategy.
All right.
And that's actually where I think it's all about multi-threading. And that's where the synergy between first party and third party data really comes into play. If you think of third party as a signal for outbound, right? You should go after these people. And the goal really should be to get a first party signal to then understand, if that person is at the low end of the rank, they are a manager and you typically sell with VPs, then that is that first party signal. Your SDR follows up with that individual contact. Perhaps they ask more, but at the same time, there's a top-down motion happening as there's a bottom up. And I think that is, it's a great reason for why you can't just have one, you need both, because it solves that account and contact issue and knowing where to prioritize.
I like that. I think it's I summarize it a lot of times. I try to explain that the first party or the behavior that is more specific to a persona, so it gives you prioritization and personalization. And the intent signals across the customer lifecycle can give you the approach or how to try and go after the account. It doesn't tell you specific actions about a persona, but it gives you direction. So if you combine the two of them together, then you are more likely to succeed because you've mapped the story of that account a lot more. And that's obviously good.
Yeah, I mean, or I also sometimes will think of intent from a third party perspective is propensity to engage, not necessarily propensity to buy. And that really is the difference. Just because someone is in market because they're searching for an article, actually to me is more of a signal of propensity to engage. And then you have to engage them to understand their propensity to buy.
Yeah,
Perhaps
I do love
general,
the terminology of in market. What do you guys think about it and how accurate is it?
I mean, everyone's in market. That's all I have to say. I mean, I find it to be distracting because it implies, and I think that what it does is it almost makes sales feel like it's a missed opportunity, when in fact, all it's saying is that there is potential for a potential opportunity. And ultimately, we are there to try and engage buyers and solve their problems. And I feel like that whole terminology almost reverses it. And so we're thinking less about them and more about us, almost as though like, oh yeah, they want to talk to us. Like, no, you still have to earn their attention and make them want to engage with you. It doesn't matter what your intent model is saying, like the same principles still apply. And so that's, I feel like it can sometimes create cognitive dissonance around what the buying journey still has to be, and how sales and marketing has to align to, facilitate that.
So well, hold on, breaking news. You're telling me that an intent for an account is not as equal to a demo request?
You heard it from me first. No.
Go ahead, Jess.
I agree with everything Tessa said. I think the one thing I would say about in market or defining in market, and everybody defines that differently as to what that really means, is that it does create a prioritization of how sales should be following up with these prospects. I mean, any given company could have thousands and thousands of potential prospects. How do you know where to point your BDR gun or your AEs? And I think you need to start somewhere. And so that definition does help you at least identify it, but it doesn't mean that people that don't fall into that little bucket that says they're in market or they're ready to buy are still not ready to buy. I mean, they could be also potentially great customers or potential buyers, but I think it helps us at least prioritize and focus in a certain area.
Yeah, but if someone's in ICP and they've engaged in a webinar versus there's an account that has intent to buy, I really hope they're following up with the former first. That's my 2 cents.
What do you think, Eyal?
Well, more on the sales side, so I deal less on the SDR on the daily basis, but I'm happy, to get an understanding from people that we reach out to where they are in the process. Sometimes it's a long sales cycle. Not everything is a quick sales cycle. So there's people out there, I think someone mentioned before, I think Jesse mentioned where people are juniors out there, or sorry, maybe it was Tessa, sorry, but you're saying, it's junior people out there that are starting the search and all that. So sometimes it's, you can't just give up on something just because, they're junior or they don't fit the bill exactly, sort of thing. So we still have to, treat them. Again, I'm looking at it more on the sales side. Once I've already more engaged, obviously I'm going to take that. The SDRs are going to be a little more careful in who they prioritize for. But from my point of view, on the sales side, when I get intent, whether it's a junior person, whether it's more senior, whether they're, spending more time looking at things or not, I still have to take an assessment of that and see if I'm going to spend my time on that, because it very well could be something that's just taking a little bit longer to close or to move forward.
I'll summarize this point and bridging the gap per se. When I look at it, it's my recommendation would be it's by segment, very specific. So for example, if you have a very non-greenfield, you're in a displacement world, and there's this big 800-pound gorilla that you're fighting day in, day out, and you have a non-client that is on nothing, like if you're looking for your competitor, yeah, that's a pretty good intent signal that you should probably take. But if you're in a greenfield world where the awareness is the play, and you have companies that are in your ICP that are searching for adjacent spaces or something, that's probably not in market, but maybe will dictate the approach that you can. So at the end of the day, if I look at everything that's been told you today, it's about, don't just take intent as like run, demo request, hot lead, but don't just take first party activity, because there's only so much of that you can control. You wish you had millions of that, but you don't. If you take both and you merge them together and optimize and look at the data over time, it's all really about getting to a one-to-one approach. That's where intent should actually help you. How to do the one-to-one approach per account and by persona and all that. The last question, because we always run out of time every panel I'm on, 20% of that is my fault as always, is on the Data Runner podcast, I asked this fairy dust or magic wand question. I'm going to ask it for you guys now. What is the future, this utopic state of this thing called intent? What do you think is this magic thing that can happen that will be like this 10x, 100x thing that will enable marketers, sales, BDRs, or anybody pretty much in the revenue world or go-to-market world to be like, wow, that would be amazing? What would that be, do you think, in the world of second and third party intent?
We're talking third party only?
Third, second, or maybe there's a fourth party one day that will come.
I mean, I think cracking open the black box, that would be really nice if you can customize the inputs. Right now it's, I think, really murky, which makes it difficult to understand. You might be, I mean, there is so many circumstances where you're overlapping intent in such a huge way. You know, if you've got JavaScript on your website for Marketo and counting visits there, and you have an intent model that counts visits to your website, well, you sort of hyperextended that intent because now you're counting it twice. And I think that that's, I would love to be able to get granular and almost like unplug and plug in different inputs that are coming through an intent model. Yeah, versus having it all just be in one blob. So I would say creating a modular approach to intent and being allowed to customize it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Well, I can't talk as much on second or third party, but because we deal a lot with first party on ours. But I think where we're getting to and where the holy grail is going to be is when I can basically be in that bedroom that we talked about before, where the person's on the Zoom call, but the camera's turned off, and I can understand what they're doing. It reminds me of sitting in a call today with a customer on Zoom, and they were very sort of hesitant at the beginning, and by the end of the demo call, they're all, yeah, let's go, and I can tell by the body language and all that. And that's what I want to be able to experience from someone that's just looking at content that I've shared with them or some other content that they've received. I want to be able to understand how excited they are, what they're looking at, where they're interested in, and really have a deep dive into that. And I think we're going to get to that. Again, creepy side, we have to keep cautious about that, but there's a lot of things that we can learn about what a customer is doing, what they're interested in, how they're sharing the content, where they're spending their time. And that's what we want to get to, I think. So it's not the second or third party, because we're dealing on a lot with on the first, but I think that's the ultimate, is to really understand. It's to go away from those days, like I said earlier, where the salesperson goes by their gut feelings. It's by the engagement of the customer. I want to be able to base the sales process by how the customer is engaging, how often, what they're doing, what's their mindset. And that's what I really want to get into. And I think that's where we'll get there at some point.
I'd say I may have a little bit of a biased view on this, but when I think about third-party data in general and kind of the demise of the cookie and what we know what's happening with privacy concerns and things, is that I worry that that type of information may become less available and less predictive. And the world that we work in at Crossbeam is really around second-party data. And if as I mentioned earlier, second-party data is essentially first-party data, which we know is the most predictive because it's access and it's information directly on our site. We can act in it in a recency world. getting access to more of that partnerly data that is timely and relative to the environment that we're working from an intent perspective, I think is going to be a game changer for a lot of companies, because now you're actually getting access to the kind of data that you want, that you can collect on your site, but now it's being permissioned and selectively shared with you from a partner. I think that's going to really change the game as we move forward.
Well, lots to happen in the world of intent. My 2 cents, just give me contact level intent. That's all I want. That's it. Marry the world of contact level as my atomic unit with intent, so that I stop the guessing game. Who was that person that went to my competitor's site? And then the BDR is like calling every one of them. It's not a fun world, right? So if we can avoid that, that's good. But who knows? Maybe one day, someday we'll have that.
I think the data privacy cops may have.
Yeah, well, you know, I said utopic world. I didn't mean it's a legal world, but I'm allowed to because I'm the moderator. Anyway, panelists, this was wicked. Thank you so much. We are 2-3 minutes over time, but it's always, you know, my pleasure. This was great. I think intent is something great, and the intention to talk about intent is even better. So thanks for showing up.
Like
Thanks
that.
for having us. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.